Now, many are demanding a stiff approach towards curbing the rise in sexual abuse offenders. And a body, particular about this is the International Federation of Women Lawyers, FIDA, Kwara State. They're calling for the castration of rapists across Nigeria while soliciting for the establishment of more family courts in the country to discourage injustice that might arise. This has generated interest from members of the public, and some believe it is the best way to go.
Now, the Kwara State chairperson of FIDA, Gloria Okodua, says that the lack of family courts discouraged complaints of child abuse, rape, and other domestic rights violations. Now, will this be a way forward to ending the abuse of mostly young teenage girls and vulnerable women? Join us to discuss this morning is Hassan Nurudeen. He's the programs manager, Hope Behind Bars Africa. Good morning, Hassan.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. Hassan, if you look at where we are as a country, we're, of course, joining the world to, have the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Would you say, how would you rate our progress rate so far against the fight, in the fight against sexual abuse?
Good morning, Osman. Thank you for having me. I think within the frame of the Nigerian society, we have not done really much to reduce the scourge of sexual and gender-based violence. What we've done is to have the documents, acts, to say, okay, this is what we are going to do. But generally, when it comes to implementation, there is little to no implementation from the government, and that's why people want a more stiff, how would I put it, punishment for people. But when you look at it, you realize that even the little ones, government has not been able to implement those ones. For example, we have the VAP Act, we have the Child Rights Act, a lot of all those acts, even in the Nigerian Constitution, crime, once you are a rapist, you are liable to get 14 to life imprisonment, depending on the case. But when you look at the number of cases that are treated each year in, year out, you realize that the government, the police, other security agencies, and even the society in general is complicit in not allowing people get the right justice. We still have issues around why are you dressed like this? You shouldn't be dressed like that. Why were you in his house? All those kind of little things, all those kind of minute and mundane excuses for not carrying out the law to the T. And that is why people feel maybe if we push for this one, it would reduce the scourge of violence, but it won't. The idea is, even the little ones that we've done, why can't we implement them? Once we begin to implement them and people have a sense of trust with the Nigerian justice system, then people can then, make use of those laws to be able to get justice, and then they won't be so bothered about, oh, let's make new laws, let's make those laws. We have like 4 or 5 acts that, treat the issue of sexual and gender-based violence, including rape, but none has been. Only about 10 states have the rapist register, the register for rapists, and even though they are not even updated regularly, I think Ekiti State is the only state that still does a bit of updating. Then you have Lagos State, but generally across the country, there's little to no updates around these issues, and this causes a lot of people to not have trust in the justice system. And if things continue to go like this, people, the organization and the associations that are raising the issue around castration, we would get to that point where jungle justice would be the next line of action for most people. So personally, I think we have the laws, but we need to implement it. The government needs to work on implementation more and more, so that people will feel safe in the society, and they would even have more trust in the justice system. Thank you.
What would you say seems to make the Nigerian government and Nigerian society drag its feet with regards to implementing some of these laws that you've mentioned? Because and it's not just with regards to gender-based violence. Generally, we have laws. There's a lot of them, but just implementing it is a challenge. So, yeah. But if we're being specific about gender-based violence and sexual assault and the likes, what would you say makes it so hard to just implement these laws?
I think Thank you again for that question. Society generally, the kind of society we are in, the way it's structured, Nigeria is more or less a patriarchal society, and so whenever laws are made and it affects men more, there is little to no implementation of that law when you look at it. For example, I remember a case of one domestic violence issue, and then the governor of a state was even the one that was now telling the husband and the wife to get back together, despite the recurring theme of domestic violence, despite the recurring theme of the woman being maltreated. A governor of a state is telling them that they should forgive each other. And when you even go lower, I mean, that's the governor of the state. When you go lower into our societies, into our villages, our towns, you see that women are encouraged to stay in those issues. There is no safe space, more or less, for women. And the idea that when you look at the Nigerian society, the economics of society also plays a very big role. Women are much more poorer than men, and so women depend a lot on men. Most married women, they depend on their husband, or at least that is what we see. And so when you want to take laws into your hands, you also think about the economic factors, and then you are told to rest. The police also play a very big role in all these things. You go and report rape cases, they don't take you serious, and then you are like, why is it like this? Everybody is complicit in it, but nobody wants to take responsibility, and nobody is trying to implement the laws. Your family will tell you to stay in that house. Your friends will ask you, why did you go to that man's place that has raped you or that has beaten you up? Society will tell you that, why did you wear that shirt? Why did you wear that clothes? It's too skimpy, it's too revealing. The police is just looking for ways to extort you. Government is not concerned about those things. And so when you lump all those things together, you begin to see why society generally drags feet, because everybody in the society doesn't treat the woman, who is more or less the victim of gender and sexual-based violence, as a first-class citizen. We treat women as second-class citizens, and that then becomes a problem in implementing many of these laws. So if we are able to look at the average woman on the street and tell her that she's a woman, she's human before she's woman, I think we'll begin to implement those laws better. And if the economy is better for women to be able to stand on their own feet, I think more women will come out, and then they'll be able to push cases in court. But because the majority of these people depend on those who are perpetrating that violence, they have little or nothing to say. And this will go on forever unless we begin to solve the root issues of all these problems, which is partially culture. Religion plays a role. The economy plays a role, and the way our society itself is structured plays a very large role, and government in itself is not so committed to those kind of things. You can report cases of rape, and then it takes a very long time for the victim to get justice. And even in cases where it is clear that there is a victim and this crime has been perpetrated, people try to settle it, and then when you settle it in-house, you say, yeah, it is for us to settle within the family. More people would not have that opportunity to then go out, because they will feel like, what's the essence of it? Why should I talk? You get all those kind of things. So if everybody, and by everybody I mean everybody, begins to play their role, you don't blame the victim. You follow up with cases, courts make sure that rape victims, they get their justice. Domestic violence victims get their justice. More people would come out. I mean, the statistics that we see about gender and sexual-based violence is low compared to what happens in the society. Many of us know a woman who is going through something like that, or even a man that is going through something like that. But because at the end of the day, when you speak about it, nothing gets done. So why speak about it? That's the idea for many people. Thank you.
As we talk about the roles that we all have to play, I'm talking about the government, individuals, religious organizations. Let's just quickly touch on the female lawyers asking that castration be meted out as punishment to men who have raped women. Would you think that this is a fitting punishment, or would you think that it's probably not fit for this crime?
The Nigerian law takes a different stance on this issue. There are a lot of laws and acts that backs rape perpetrators and gender-based violence, and because again the Nigerian justice system is imperfect. I mean, no justice system is perfect in the world, but again, I mean, the average Nigerian does not even, you are not willing to place your life savings on the Nigerian justice system. So sometimes it's difficult for you to then say you can trust the Nigerian justice system with this kind of punishment. So, for example, what if you didn't commit the rape and then you've been castrated? It's more or less like somebody has been sent to the electric chair for a murder that he didn't commit. It's very, very difficult. These are issues that have nuances, and they are very, very emotional issues that if you don't look at it critically, you begin to met out justice on. I mean, you begin to met out punishment on those who are not even guilty of that thing. So it's very, very complex, and I would not advise for it. Castration is more or less like a capital punishment. I think if we followed some of the laws that we have at hand right now, we would be able to reduce the scourge of sexual and gender-based violence. So, for example, let's take just for example, if one person is accused of rape and then he's castrated, and then years later you find out that he isn't guilty of it, how do you then reverse that kind of issue? I mean, you can't reverse castration. It's a very, very complex issue. And again, if the Nigerian Correctional Service and the Nigerian correctional facilities are good, there's a way to balance things. Even on issues where you have been discovered that you are not, that the person is not guilty, the state does not even provide some form of compensation for the person. So it's a very, very complex issue, and I'm not sure Nigeria has gotten to that stage where we can then met out capital justice, capital punishment to people, because our own justice system is not even, I mean, it's not even doing 30% of what the average Nigerian expects from the Nigerian justice system. So for me, it's a bit complex and nuanced, and I don't think it's the way to go right now. Maybe we should follow up with more implementation. I mean, a more robust implementation of the general laws that we have now, the Child Rights Act and all those other things. And then maybe we can follow up with state governments, on publishing list of sexual offenders. That will go a long way. Nigeria is a country where shame is a weapon, and so if you can use it against people will fall in line. Once maybe you have been all the evidence points that you have committed that issue, that rape or that gender violence, and then your name is published on the general newspaper or on the state website, or it's pasted everywhere. People know how to avoid those kind of people. They ostracize them. Those are punishments, that is still reversible. But for castration, it's very, very complex, and you don't want to push the Nigerian justice system into that kind of situation.
Yeah, okay.
And again,
I think you can also quickly speak on, because you're a man, so let's have you also speak on, the male perspective, concerning all of this. The castration, of course, that we're speaking about now is definitely male focused. So what do you think the conversation should be like, going forward with regards to gender-based violence? I understand that it's not just females who suffer it, but of course they are majority of the victims. But what do you think the conversation should be like among men here in Nigeria concerning gender-based violence?
So I think more men should speak to fellow men. Like, the more, when you look at, I can't hear her. Should I go on?
Yes, go ahead.
Go on, please.
Okay. So I think more men should speak to each other. Although there is no data to back up this fact, but men tend to listen to other men, and it's easy for a man to shame the other man. And so if we if we are together and then we say this is an issue that we want to end, I am sure the way it would work out would be fine. And again, when you look at people in the position of power, people who have the people who the society has bestowed power to to reduce the scourge of sexual and gender-based violence, they are mostly men. Judges, a lot of them are men. Policemen, a lot of them are men. The most influential people in society, men mostly. And so if we are all coming together and say, okay, this is what we need to end, I'm sure we'll find a good solution to it in the end. And also, I think the economy should be widened to accommodate more women. One very big issue why people don't report rape or domestic violence or any sort of gender-based violence is because they are tied to the apron strings of their own perpetrators. So your husband is meting out punishment on you for no just cause, even for any cause. Your husband beats you up and everything like that. When you think about the kids, who will feed the kids? How would they go about and everything? What about me? Who would feed me and everything like that? It then becomes a problem for the woman. She cannot move out. She cannot seek for justice by herself and everything like that. But if the woman is much more buoyant in terms of her pockets, she's able to push for justice. I mean, you would look at most countries around the world where there is a high rate of justice for rape victims. It's because the woman has her own agency. The woman can speak for herself. The woman is not scared that if I speak up today, where will I eat tomorrow? If they send this man to prison, would I be able to live my life and everything like that? If we're able to consider those two, I think we would be able to reduce the issue of sexual and gender-based violence in the not too far future. Thank you.
I agree, and I think it's a good thing that you mentioned this part now, because when people hear of gender-based violence, they immediately always just think about sexual assault, and sexual, violence. But that's not just it. There's a lot of other ways that gender-based violence plays out that encompasses many other ways. So that's a good thing to mention. That financial abuse is also part of gender-based violence, physical abuse, but can we honestly, as a country, say that we are serious about, fighting gender-based violence when we still have parts of the country that don't find anything wrong with child brides? They don't see that there's much, wrong with marrying 12-year-olds or 13-year-olds. So how can Nigeria be a part of this fight when it knows that still happens in Nigeria?
Again, I would go back to the initial thing I said, that men should talk to men. Majority of people,
the men should talk to men. Thing. This is this is a culture. This is a religious and and traditional culture. It's not men.
It is. Well, when you look at the culture, who are the ones who make culture? It's men and women. But then again, who are the custodian of culture? Majority are men. And when you look at the Nigerian society, who is more influential in between the both genders? It's men. And I'm not saying everything falls on the man, but I'm saying that if the man wishes to push something, it then goes a long way compared to women. And if we want women to also push for things, we then need to give them that sort of agency that then allows them to work on themselves. The reason why a man is less prone to sexual and gender-based violence is because he's not tied to the apron string of another, and so it happens less often. If we are able to get to that point where women have some sort of economic balance with men, I'm sure they'll be able to push it too. But because there is that imbalance there. And also when you go down to local communities, when we go down to local communities where these issues happen, men are the most influential. When you carry, let's say in a village somebody has been raped and then goes to the village chief. Who is the village chief? A man. And then who are his subordinates? Men mostly, and then maybe a few women. And there's also the thing of internalized misandry, or is it misogyny, where even women support some of these issues. It's not because they want to support it most of the time. It's because they look at the whole entire issue holistically. They don't look at just this rape that has happened once to address that issue. So, and that's why they will advise you, let it go. just keep quiet about it. Don't say anything. You're not pregnant, right? Let's leave it like that and everything like that. Because again, they've looked at it holistically, and then they don't see any way out in the nearest future. So we need men to talk to men again, and then that culture of rape would then and sexual and gender-based violence and violence in general would reduce. Thank you.
Hassan Nurudeen, Programs Manager, Hope Behind Bars Africa. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.